everybody, it's Lon.TV, and it's time for another retro video on the channel. We haven't done one of these in a while, and every once in a while I do like to take a look at old technology and see how it might influence what we do today. And there is no topic more relevant to that theme than computer bulletin board systems, or BBS systems. And I ran one way back in the early 90s where I took my old Apple IIgs, I hooked up a modem to it, and these are modems not connecting to DSL or cable or any other kind of modern technology, but to a standard analog phone line. And once that computer was connected and running what is essentially BBS server software, people could call into my computer from their computers over a phone line and do things like send email to each other, participate in message boards, play games, share files. Pretty much everything we do today on social media, people were doing with old 8-bit computers back in the 70s, 80s, and in the 90s. Of course, as we got closer to the 80s and 90s, this got a lot more robust in its nature, and of course greater hardware was brought to bear. But really the core of what you're going to see was largely the same up until the internet really became commercialized and accessible to many people. And what was cool about BBS systems was that they were very local. So even though they were online, so to speak, they were very geographically centered, because here in the United States at least, and I would imagine many other places around the world, we had local calling areas that would allow us to make phone calls for free as part of our phone service. So for me, I had probably a 20 or 15 mile radius around the town that I lived in that I could call for free. And there was probably about 4 or 5 of these hobbyist run systems, very much like my system, that I could dial into and play games on, or have message conversations with other people, email conversations with other people. And those are the ones that I frequently connected to. And everybody connecting to those systems on a regular basis was also local. And some people preferred to hang out in one system versus another. And so you kind of developed regulars. And each of these systems really took on their own personalities too. They often reflected the sysop, or the system operator, that ran them. And this is not the internet, so this is, you know, nowhere near the robustness of point and click and video and everything else. This is what it largely looked like. You had a terminal screen, looks like an old DOS screen here, and you would sometimes get some rudimentary graphics. So we'll connect to one system here that's running to this day, actually. This one's called the Silicon Underground BBS, and they did have some basic graphics, as you can see here. So I'll pop in and out of this little screen here so you can get a feel for some of the different graphics that you could do on these systems. And it really did look pretty cool, and there was a lot of things that people did to push what was a very limited technology to the limit. So you did get a lot of really cool artwork and some other things that really made these systems unique to their operator, and it was really, really cool to go out and explore. Sometimes I would actually do a long distance phone call, much to the chagrin of my parents, to log into some of these really awesome systems that were in larger metropolitan areas that were just so unique and so cool, and really doing some amazing artwork with what was really a very limited palette in which to work with. And I would suggest too, after you're done watching this video, to go check out the BBS documentary by Jason Scott. He's no longer selling it, unfortunately, but you can find it on the Internet Archive. I'll put a link down below. It's about 7 or 8 hours. It's broken up into different parts, but he covered this entire era in such great detail, and talked to the people that were doing this really at the top level of bulletin board systems. It's a really fascinating look at how we got to where we are today. And if you are in this industry and didn't really have a lot of experience with BBSs in the past, check it out, because everything that we do was influenced there. And I think if you are developing new products, there might be some ideas you could glean from looking at the way things used to be. All right, so we're going to take a look now at my BBS. It's not publicly accessible anymore, but I do still operate it inside my firewall here. It's called the Matrix Returns, and I'm running a BBS package called Synchronous Net, which is a Windows-based BBS system that is still accessible the old way via a terminal connection like this, but it is modern in the sense that it works over the internet. So you can telnet into this versus having a modem hooked up. And I would say a bulk of the BBSs that are left operating today are running this software package, primarily because of its ease of use in getting it configured and running. There are some really brave souls that have managed to get the old original BBS software. Some of the more popular packages were like Wildcat or Maximus, which is what I used to run. They've been able to get those to work via Telnet, but for the most part, a lot of people just go with Synchronous Net when they want to get their nostalgic fix on. And you can see kind of how this works. So I'm logged in with a software package called SyncTerm, which is the best way to access BBS files. And again, I'll put links to all this stuff down in the description below. Now, I want to show you something on the main screen here after I logged in. So you'll see here that I've got some mention of time online today. So 26 minutes out of a maximum amount of 500 minutes per day. Now, I'm the sysop. That's like the biggest number you can put into the system. But time was very valuable on BBS systems because with only one phone line for the most part that people would call into, if somebody was on the system, nobody else could get in while that person was in. So limiting time for users was a very critical thing. And there was often things that you could do to reward users for good behavior or being helpful in managing some of the message boards or whatever. You could grant different levels of access. So some users could have more time than others might have. And that would allow them to get more things done on the system. So time was very valuable. Not so much now in the modern era because these systems can support 10, 20 people on at once, if not more, because the internet, of course, works a lot differently than our old phone lines did. You have the option to check your email and search all the message boards for new messages, but I'm going to jump ahead here and just show you what the main menu of these look like. So this is a main menu. I apologize for my dirty screen here, but most BBS systems had 4 core areas that most people got involved with. So you had your message boards, which were public message discussions. There were some that were local to the system that you were on, as well as some that worked over some networks. And I'll talk about those networks in a minute to connect some of these systems together. You had email, which largely was limited to just the system that you were on. So I used to have to go and log into a bunch of different systems that I was active in to check all my email. For the most part, email was unique to the system you were on. So it's not like today's email where you can send a message to an address and it would just get to the person you're sending it to. You'd actually have to go to that system, log in and read your email there, and then go on to the next one to catch up on everything. It was quite a lot of work sometimes to be able to do all that. You also had files sections where you could download files and upload files. I'll show you more of that in a second. And you had external programs, which for the most part on many BBS systems were games. There were some really cool games that you could play. They required some imagination because, again, it was mostly terminal and text-based, but that was what you got. Let me show you the message boards really quick. I'll hit the jump key here, and we'll go over to our choices here. So I have some different choices for message groups, and I have the main message group, which is local to my system, and then we have Fidonet and DoveNet, which are networks, and I'll show you those in a second too. So basically, the message boards would work like this. You could go in and hit the R key and go through and read messages. The system would keep track of the last message that you read. So when you pop back in, it would start with new messages that you hadn't seen since your last arrival on the system. So this was a message when I was still running the system publicly. This guy, JD Crunchman, logged in and said, hey, I accidentally discovered this, and really cool that you're doing this. And this is the kind of stuff that you would get a lot of times when you were running a BBS. Unfortunately for me, and I think for many other BBS operators in this modern era, you get people that come in nostalgic who get a little bit of a taste of what things used to be like, and then they don't come back again. So it's really hard to build community on one of these sites, primarily because it's so much easier to go to Facebook or some other social media platform to be able to do that kind of thing. But you do have some options. I could reply to him. I can delete the message because I'm the sysop. I can take messages out of the system if I wanted to do that. So pretty much everything you would do now on a modern message board you can do. The one thing, though, is that the messages were not threaded. So you had to kind of do a list of all the messages that were on the message board and kind of jump your way through them. It was kind of difficult to jump through a common topic thread. So navigation wasn't as advanced as we might have it today on many systems, but that's how that works. Now, the networks I was talking about were really amazing. This one, Fidonet, is the most interesting to me. So basically what happened is that these systems started sprouting up all over the place, and again, because of that locality issue that it was expensive for many users to call into systems in other parts of their state or country or whatever, you really were kind of tied into your local system. But these sysops began to get to know each other because they all shared a passion for the same hobby, and over time they built an enormous network. I think at one point on Fidonet, which was the biggest network that was around back in the BBS era, by the way, it's still operating now, there was about 20 or 30,000 BBS systems all connected to each other through the Fidonet. And this wasn't connected via the internet. Parts of the Fidonet were able to send messages into the internet and back, but these systems connected to each other through an echoing process where my BBS at the end of the night would call up to a hub that was above me. I would send messages that users generated on my system to that hub. That hub in turn would then send those messages up to its hub, and those would get sprinkled down to BBSs all over the world. So basically within a day or so, a message that I posted locally here in Connecticut would make its way all the way around the world and back again just by one system calling the other via a telephone line and a modem. It was absolutely amazing how this worked. The Fidonet still exists. In fact, there is some active discussion on the Phyto news group here, so I'll pull that up real quick and you can get a feel for all the discussion here. So this last message I looked at on this board was back from October, but there's been about 800 messages posted since then. So there are still people on Fidonet talking with each other or fighting with each other for the most part. A lot of, they used to joke and call it Phytonet because there was just a lot of flame wars that would just erupt out of nowhere over the most benign topics sometimes. But you can get a feel though for what went on there. Let me pull up a message here too. So we'll pull up one that Paul Hayton here is writing to all. And you can see here there's some discussion going on. And then at the bottom, what would happen would be each system would tag where they were. So he posted from the Mystic BBS systems. Remember, we're logged into my BBS, but the Mystic BBS sent this out to Fidonet and it made its way through the network to my area. So the 3- network is a different portion of the world than I'm in. So my Fidonet address is 1:320/111, and these numbers kind of directed messages to where they had to go. In many ways, kind of like IP addresses do now. This was how Fidonet works. So there was ways that things could get routed around. You could do direct netmail email messages from one system to the other, but that often required you to pay the sysop a little bit of money to make the toll phone call to get that email delivered. So it wasn't the best email system, but the Echo Mail, which is what this is called, really worked out very well. But for the most part, a lot of these message boards are really no longer active. So I'll jump around to another one here. Let me quit out of this menu. We'll go back to the Fidonet groups here. So you can see some of these just have no traffic at all. So, you know, for example, the New England chat is completely dead. That used to be a really pretty busy message board for people in New England back in the day. Other ones get a little bit of traffic. So like, for example, the Apple message board, we'll go ahead and read. Let me go back to the first message. It was back from 2011 when I first set up the system. So from 2011 to now, there's only been about 50 messages posted on that Apple Echo. So a lot of the ones that were always active and busy just kind of fizzled out over time. I'm going to show you, though, a packet from an offline reader that was from the heyday back when BBSs were a little bit more popular, so you can see the kind of activity that we got on these. I'll show you that a little bit later in the video. The biggest thing that I think BBSs did was build a lot of companies, specifically one you may have heard of called id Software, the makers of Doom and Quake and many other games. They got their start distributing their games through file sections like this one. So basically you would log into a BBS system. They had different subjects for files. So for example, you had a text file area maybe where you could post written content. There was another area where you'd have maybe utilities for your computer. There was others that were games. And in the games section, that's how I downloaded Doom. I had to call out to a BBS system in Massachusetts because that was one I knew would get the file early. Downloaded Doom. I was able to install it on my computer, and then I uploaded it as a courtesy to all my local bulletin board systems. And that's how files really got around, which was you would download a file from somewhere else. Sometimes you'd have to pay its whole phone call to get to that BBS to grab that file, and then you would upload that file to your local BBS system. And a lot of systems would require you to do uploads in order to download. They didn't want you leeching too much because, again, time is precious on a BBS system. So if you were going to be spending time on there, they wanted you to upload at least something to meet a ratio so you can continue downloading. There was a lot of, each sysop had a different policy with it. But for the most part here, you get a file listing. You could go ahead and then hit D to download. So I could download this mm.txt file. I'll say, yes, I want to download it. Some systems, again, had credits, and you could go ahead and download those things. There was a file protocol called, there's a couple different ways you could download stuff, but most of the terminal software programs you were using to access these BBSs had a means of transferring files, and some were automatic. So later in the BBS lifecycle, they had something called Z modem. You have to actually specify the protocol you wanted to download with. If you selected Z modem and then started the download process, the BBS you were connected to would automatically get your computer to start receiving that file. You would download it, unzip it, just like you do today, run the software, and it was pretty cool to be able to go grab games, especially games as revolutionary as Doom, via your modem for free. And what their business model was back in the day, id Software, was they gave you the first 7 levels for free, and then if you wanted more content, you could mail them a check in the mail, and they would mail you back some floppy disks with the rest of the game on it, and later CDs. So that's how they built their business, and it worked. And there were so many enthusiasts on BBS systems that they could go out and download files in that way. So that was really something there. Last thing I want to show you before we go back and look at one of these snapshots I have from the BBS days, is the external programs or the games. And we have one of my favorite games here was called Trade Wars 2002. So it did do some cool ANSI graphics here, but for the most part, this was a text-based game. And this is a space trading game. So what you would have is you would basically log into the system every day. At night, my system would run a little utility that would, kind of process the automated players in the game. There was like a Ferengi group that would run around and wreak havoc in certain parts of the universe that would do things. So you can see the Ferengi moved here and did their thing. And basically what you would start out with is a planet. So I have my planet here called Jakku, and your planets would make stuff, and you could put the stuff in your ship and bring it to space stations around the universe and sell and trade things. You build up your money, you make your ship better, and you could kind of go from there. However, there was people that would get really good at this game and would set up a lot of traps for you. So they would mine certain sectors. So if you hit a certain sector where there were mines, your ship would blow up and you lose everything. You'd have to start all over again the next day. It was very unforgiving in how it approached things. But for the most part, you could warp to different sectors here. So this particular sector, you can go to these different numbered sectors and kind of explore the universe a little bit. So I could just move that way. I could also say move to sector 1, which is the Earth system, and I could just do an express warp over there, and you can see how that works. This was not the most compelling gaming experience, but now we see here that as I'm trying to get over to where I'm going here, the Ferengi are in one of the sectors that I'm approaching, and I could get blown up if I'm not careful. So I'm going to try to get out of here and see if they'll let me get out of there. Sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. And then I could get down to Earth here and do some trading, buy a new ship, or do whatever. So not the most, again, no graphics here for the most part. It was, again, one of those things you had to use your imagination for. But what was cool about how Trade Wars worked is that as I built up my player, I would log off, and then other people could log in, and things that I did in the universe might impact their game. So for example, if I discovered another player with a planet somewhere and I had a big enough group of fighters around my ship, I could actually land and invade their planet and steal their resources. And when they logged back in, they would see that I had done that to them. For balancing purposes, they would allow players to put defensive weapons on the planet too. So there was things to balance out this fact that you couldn't play in real time. So you really have to spend a lot of time beefing up your planet's defenses in addition to making sure that you had a large enough offensive power to fight off the computer-controlled Ferengi players as well as other people in the game. Really fun game. In fact, a lot of people are still playing this. You can log in via Telnet to Trade Wars specific servers now and play, but just be warned, the people that are playing that game are so good at it that your ship will last all of 10 minutes in that universe. And what's funny too is you can make these really large universes with thousands of sectors, and somehow they'd still manage to find me hiding out in different parts of that universe. So really cool games that you could play on there and have some fun playing with other friends. It was also fun to be able to try to coordinate activities with other people and try to build out sectors of space that we would control as an alliance to keep things under control. There was a lot of games like that that you could play also on there. So I want to show you one other thing real quick, because I have what was called a quick packet loaded up here from a BBS that I used to operate, or not, well, that was a co-sysop of, but I used to frequent quite a bit, called the Star of Life in my area here. So let me close out the other Synchronet window here just to get out of the way here. Now, what these quick packets were was a way of getting around the time issue. So you remember I mentioned that time was a very valuable commodity on a BBS system, and one of the things that happened towards the latter half of the BBS life cycle was the development of this quick protocol where I could go ahead and download all the message boards that I was very active in, put them onto my computer, access them locally with a reader. I could respond to messages and participate every way I could if I was connected online. And then when I was done writing all my messages and everything, I could reconnect to the bulletin board system, upload my reply packet, and then it would then send it out back to those networks I talked about earlier. So quick packets were a really convenient way to, both for the sysop as well as the user, to spend more time on message boards. I spent a lot of time talking with other people all over the world, and this was a great development to be able to do these things. And I found a file, this looks like from 1993, from a BBS system that I went on quite a bit, and they were on a different network than I was on, so it was a neat place to get some stuff going there. But what's cool is that this packet is like a snapshot in time. This is back from like probably June of 1993. And this is exactly what was going on that system that day. So you can kind of see how active things were. So these are the bulletins that would appear when you logged in. So they give you a list of the hottest downloads on their site back in 1993. So we have a couple of zip files, a few mod music files that would play some cool music and stuff. You had a list of the last 15 callers to call in to that site. So you can see there's a bunch of different people that actually called in. People were pretty active on these systems. The baud rate was how fast they were connecting at. So having a 14,400 baud modem, 14.4K, was kind of a luxury item back in 93. Most people were at 2,400 baud. That's basically 2,400 bits per second. Bits, not megabits, not K bits, but bits. So we are exponentially faster now. I have like 150 megabit per second downstream speed here in 2015. So you can see how things have progressed from a speed standpoint since those early days of connecting with modems that we had on there. A couple other things that would provide some basic statistics on the website. These were a list of other BBS systems that were in the area. The hub here was actually the Fidonet hub for our region. So that was a site that I used to log into quite a bit. So you can get a feel for all of that. So that was cool stuff on there. And then of course they've got their top games that would be on there. So Legend of the Red Dragon was the most popular game on that site at the time. And then a couple other things here too that you can pop through. And again, every one of these games would post its own bulletins about what was going on in the game when people logged in. So these door games were a big deal. They called them door games, by the way. So now we can go in and take a look at some messages that were going on. So we'll look at the computer games forum, for example. This is like one day's worth of stuff. And they were talking about things like Sonic the Hedgehog here, so you can get a feel for what was going on here. And actually, they were talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 at that point. So these were all the the conversations happening, and you can just see the diversity of names here and just how active these message boards were back in the day that these BBSs were the main vehicle. So now these have been replaced by YouTube, GameSpot, IGN, all the major game sites where people are having these game conversations. This is where people were talking about this stuff back in the 90s, in the early 90s, before the internet really came into its place here. So you get a feel for a lot of stuff. There's modems and other things. I don't know why they're talking about Pee Wee Herman here or not, but there was always a couple of trolls that would pop in just like they do now. CD-ROM topics were very popular because that was a very new technology at the time, and a lot of people were selling CD-ROMs on here too. So there was a lot of discussion about the best CD-ROM drives to buy and that sort of stuff too. So a lot of things going on back in the BBS era. It was funny, this was 1993. I'd say by 1995, things became a ghost town because the internet became more accessible. You could get on the internet with a connection that would allow you to use the web with your modem, and that was a big change to go from this terminal-based interface to a point-and-click interface with pictures and multimedia, and it all happened very, very quickly. And the coolest thing about the internet, and I think what really did in the BBSs, was the fact that you could do more than one thing at a time and access more than one thing at a time on the internet. When you were logged into one of these BBS systems, your phone line was tied up, and in many cases your computer was tied up if you were running DOS still, because there was no other way to get your computer to do anything when you were running a single program connected to a single BBS system directly, and that was it. So this really fell apart very quickly once things became a lot more accessible with these direct internet connections, even via a modem, and that is what I think really kind of did in BBS systems the popular way to get around. But they are still out there. We saw with that one site that we logged into, those really cool graphics, those sites are still out there. They still exist. You can pop into them, become parts of those communities, and some are still pretty active actually, because a lot of them retained their user base from way back when and just kind of transitioned their systems over to internet access. And and kept everything largely intact. So it's still a pretty vibrant area. A lot of people are running these just for nostalgic purposes, but some do provide some service out to the world, and they're definitely worth checking out and experiencing, because really you can see the foundations of where we ended up today. I definitely want you to head over and check out BBS, the documentary by Jason Scott. I think it provides, it's going to be a long watch, but it's definitely worth watching because it really gives an idea as to the scope of what happened here, especially with the Fidonet, where we connected people for the first time across the world in a way that they controlled versus some corporation. This Fidonet thing was just built as a hobbyist venture. It created its own governance structure, its own protocols, and became this huge thing that connected a lot of the world before the world had access to the internet. And he just covers every aspect of the BBS lifestyle, which I think is just so fascinating, and you should definitely check out that documentary if you haven't already. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what these bulletin board systems were. I think you can get a feel, though, for everything that we're doing now on these modern systems was being done then, and it's just a little bit easier now than it was back then. But still, this is the social media thing is not anything new. It was around for quite some time before we all got on the scene with our fancy videos and everything else. Love to talk about BBS systems, so definitely leave me some comments below. I love doing these retro things, especially around the holidays when things slow down a little bit on the channel. So I'd love to hear what you thought of this video and anything else you would like to see with BBSs. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching. This channel is brought to you by the generosity of my Patreon supporters. If you find the channel helpful, you too can contribute for as little as $1 a month. Visit Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more.